My name is Lori Garrow. I'm a professor in GIS at Charlotte, UNC Charlotte. Been teaching GIS for over 20 years and helped develop the program from infancy into what it is today. And I want to talk to you today about how we go about helping students to develop a passion for GIS that also makes them employable. And I see I have one of my students as testimony that they do graduate and get jobs. Okay, so just a little bit about what I'm going to talk about, then what is the employability skills framework, how we infuse employability into our GIS coursework, some of the social and environmental justice perspectives that students have adopted that helps them to really develop this passion, and then elements from a sample syllabus. Okay. So in higher education, we want to prepare students for careers in GIS, but not just as technicians. We want them to be the people who can work their way up. Even if they start with data collection in field work, they can become the managers and CEOs one day in GIS. So through our curriculum and our course content, we want to first instill spatial thinking so that any problem you approach is from a spatial perspective. So we understand why things are where they are and how they're interconnected. Then we teach the technologies, related analytical and programming skills so that they're very qualified for employment, and then demonstrate through application not only the jobs, where they can get jobs, but how we develop this passion for GIS. Okay. So the employability skills framework that I use comes from this college and career readiness that was developed by the Department of Education. So it's for adult education, technical education, but I adapt it to the higher education framework as well. And here's where you can find out more about it if you're interested. The diagram looks like this. And of course, you can't see all the components here, so we'll take a look at what they're made of. But employability, so if you're an employer and you want to hire our students, you're interested in the applied knowledge, the workplace skills, but also the effective relationships that help them to be good employers, or employees rather. So for our applied knowledge, we want the academic skills. So of course, reading comprehension, give them lab exercises, they have to read the step-by-step, oral, written, and graphic expression through reports, through presentations, through just answering questions in their labs. Mathematical strategies and procedures, so a number of our lab exercises incorporate calculations. They have to apply mathematics to spatial problems. Logic and analytical skills, so their queries, how do they construct queries, how do they use map algebra for analytical purposes, and additional scientific principles according to the different applications. We want them to think critically. Critical thinking, employers tell me that's a really important component when they want to hire somebody. Can you think beneath the surface? Can you be creative? Can you differentiate fact from what is misrepresentation? So we do some of that as well. Can you make sound decisions, solve problems, and so on? So very important skills that we infuse into the lab exercises as well as the final projects so that students develop these skills. Information use, a lot of the workplace skills is very straightforward in terms of GIS. Can you locate and download data that's relevant to your study, obtain information from that data, be able to classify and analyze the data within the program, and how do you communicate that information? Various ways to use the technology, the software, the tools, techniques, mobile and web technology, as well as programming. Okay. Systems thinking, okay, understanding using GIS, but thinking larger system as well. And how do you communicate your skills? So verbal and graphic communication. I studied cartography, so I really pound in cartographic design. Can you comprehend written material? Can you convey that in a way that others can comprehend what you're saying? And how do you observe and communicate what you observe? Effective working relationships, we establish this through individual and group work, through your deadlines, through the rubrics and assignments. So you have to become a very, person who is professional, who's willing to learn, who's flexible, who adapts to different situations, who keeps deadlines, works well in a team, can be a leader as well as a follower, and sometimes negotiates or resolves conflict. So when we have group work, there can be conflict. And how do we resolve that? Respect individual differences, especially as we work with social justice and environmental justice data. We're working with people of different backgrounds, some of them marginalized by racism, by sexism, and so on. So can we respect each other's differences? So social justice-oriented projects can be social or environmental justice. They help, through the project design, help students to think critically, to understand that what we see on the surface is not necessarily explained by the surface, that we have to dig deeper beneath the surface. So why do we have crime where it is? Why are there dropouts? We take a look at conditions that people are exposed to, how they're treated, how that marginalizes them from opportunities, so maybe makes them more prone to rely on crime or to drop out of high school, and so on. So thinking critically through project design. How do you collect and prepare data that represents what's going on in totality? And then use the technology and the analytic skills to analyze that data properly and communicate in ways that show the purpose, that indicate the process, and results in a very thoughtful manner. So for this, take a look at some of the work that students have done. We don't have time for all of it, but go through some of it so you could see a little bit about what they do. Let me jump out to here. You showed me how to jump back and forth, but okay, so here's one looking at the toxic chemical risk, and did I lose it? Let me go back to this and see if I can get to it this way. I'll just link. Where did he go? I might have to skip this one. Does someone know how to toggle back and forth with this? No? No. Windows P.
This one and the P.
Just the P.
Mm-hmm. And then pick. You want to do duplicate.
Oh, cool. Should know these things. Do GIS, but not this other technology. Okay, so one of my students was concerned with school shootings and took a look at 30 years of school shootings, primarily in the Charlotte area. Scary to think that it's been going on that long, but she used the more recent tools, the ArcGIS Online, to develop heat maps of where the shootings were taking place, Also, where were the nearest hospitals? So were students within access if they needed to? Let me go back this way. It's a very interesting. There's the hotspots. Here was drive time to hospitals. And then she developed her closing arguments here based on her analysis. Another student, toxic chemical risk and poverty. So she inserted some video. We won't watch the video, but you can insert video, which is exciting to students when they can incorporate multimedia. Looking at our households having to write, so write and explain. And her map is not showing up here. Sometimes that happens. Another video. The location of some of these sites that may have toxic chemical waste, and her initial map that had poverty showed the overexposure of persons who are lower income to toxic waste. So in Charlotte, this area is wealthy here, and these areas are our low income areas, and they're the ones that get disproportionately exposed to toxic waste. And then talk about what does that mean for people and how do we resolve that kind of situation so that all people are kept safe. So very interesting project. Food deserts, access to fresh food is another topic that students enjoy. So they have to indicate their purpose, their project plan, tell me where did they get their data, how did they create their different shape files, which tools did they use, and in this process, they're in essence developing a way that they would explain to an employer if they were in an interview. So they have to show the different tools, techniques. So when they use calculations, what kind of mapping did they do? And then their final product, and they have to explain what it means. So this student was able to show that for certain areas, number of households that have access to grocery stores, that there are areas where people do not have access. Okay. They always have to indicate their references. Homeless shelters, so analyzing where are our shelters, what access do homeless persons have to food and to shelter facilities, and what are some regional characteristics, and producing a map where, again, they have to apply the different tools and create very creative representations of what people are subjected to when they're homeless and what services do they have, where are there gaps in the services, what else do we need to provide for them. And they have to, of course, analyze the results, indicate tools and techniques as well as their findings. Childhood lead poisoning. There was a lengthy description, but some maps that indicate where children are disproportionately exposed to lead. And we know that lead can cause brain damage in infants and small children. So it's a topic of great concern as well, indicating the overlap of a number of priorities. Pre-1950 housing tends to have more exposure to lead, and the total number of children with high levels of lead in their blood. Kind of scary, but important information. Environmental variables on age of death and of low birth weight. So again, concerned with environmental justice topics, indicating some of the data that she looked at that affects environmental quality and also access. So through air, water, and soil, if there's contamination, we can get that in our drinking water. Or children play in the soil, get it in their hands, put their fingers in their mouths, and so on. So considering a whole range of topics, tree canopy tends to create a healthier environment. Are there areas where we don't have enough trees, and so on. She used kind of advanced spatial statistical tools. So I won't go into all the tools, but very, very detailed analysis of where's our clusters of hot spots and cold spots where we find these different characteristics. And then coming up with associations where age of death hotspots and low birth weight hotspots in relation to those other factors. Okay. So if anyone's interested in any of these, take a look afterwards. Spatial analysis of crisis assistance ministries. So someone from crisis assistance came to the class and said, are there students who can do some work for us? So they got their work done free, and the students got to do something for the community that was helpful. So this student did another fairly advanced project, indicating all the tools and techniques that he used. And we won't analyze each of these in detail, but by looking at various maps, different constraints, as he was calling them, then coming up with composites that indicate where services are provided and where they are needed. So from this map, Crisis Assistance Ministry can know where it's serving and where are some areas that are not being served, so they can improve their work. So and then identifying specific neighborhoods to recommend for more services. Another very detailed look at private wells and low income. Again, wells that are contaminated by environmental toxins can affect brain development in young children. Indicating the data sources, where he obtained the data, and then going through a whole series of steps indicating the previous and the product from the tool used. Again, we won't go through all of this, but very detailed, showing that students really do grasp the way to use GIS to analyze problems. And they can demonstrate this to an employer. So all of these products become a portfolio, if you will. Okay, and I think I'm running out of time, so I'm going to jump ahead to see some of the different topics. Domestic violence. So in a sample syllabus, for example, for our fundamentals of GIS, identify learning outcomes that employ the employability skills, various kinds of assessments that teach those skills, as well as the social justice topics, and then a sample course outline. So these, using the Bloom's taxonomy verbs, develop a series of objectives that first teach the fundamental information with GIS, and then how we move into the analysis tools, the modeling, being able to formulate projects. Using lab exercises to demonstrate these. So some of them are pretty straightforward. Map projections, for example, can't get too creative with that. But then how we use the tools and techniques, I take different social justice topics as well and show students how you bring in different data sets and analyze information. Use in-class exercises to demonstrate and to explain. Students follow step-by-step instructions really well, but they do it blindly, that they don't think. So if you do it with them ahead of time and say, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and remember this, and ask them questions, okay, what tool did we just use, and so on, it helps them. And then when they get to the lab work, they actually remember what they're doing and do a better job. You see them progress much better. Assign points for that as well, because it improves class attendance. Final projects tend to be when the students shine, so that's when you give them free rein, what you want to do, and a lot of them do, as you could see, develop these social and environmental justice topics. They work either in groups of 2 or by themselves and put together some very, very advanced projects for introductory classes. And again, those projects can become part of a portfolio. Examinations, students hate tests, but they test knowledge of the concepts, the theories, the techniques, and then I give, within at least the final exam, they actually have to do some analysis and create maps, which tests them for job interviews. If they're given a task in a job interview, they really have to know what they're doing. So this helps them as well. Points assigned. Some of the course topics, again, starting with fundamentals, they have to understand the basics, and then we move into map design, how you communicate information, start with vector data, and then raster data. Even in an intro class, getting into some pretty advanced techniques. So I'm in my question period. So are there any questions? Yes. Programming class is entirely Python. Yeah, this was syllabus for the fundamentals course. So once they finish fundamentals, then they go on into programming, into spatial database design, into modeling applications for different areas, whether it's environmental or social. But yes, we make them learn Python. Other questions? Yes.
Do you see other opportunities for organizations to come in and seek assistance from students? Because that seemed like a really cool thing where the outreach, the ministries person came and got help, but I don't imagine that same organization needs help every semester.
When I meet someone and I think that there's a way that we can work together, I always reach out. And students don't always come up with their own projects, so it's nice to have an option as well. Do you know some organizations?
I might. If I do, particularly in the Mecklenburg County area, I may reach out to you.
Sure, please do. Yes?
So you mentioned that the students get like a portfolio out of this with their projects, and I can see that especially with like story maps and GIS Online. Are those like available on our GIS Online or made publicly available, or are they just within UNC Charlotte, or how do you see them, I guess?
They're within UNC Charlotte. If the student is interested, then we can help them to actually publish it. They can also develop their own website, upload their
Secondary classes.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for your attention and your attendance.